Can you imagine if you could just create, let's say, 10 million pounds and put it into your bank account and then go around town buying loads of stuff? The shops would be cleaned up by just you, and they'd have to get more supply, or they might raise the price to stop you from buying everything. I mean, that's what QE is, guys, and that's why we're going to see hyperinflation. Saturday, May 11th, 2024, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Today we're going to look at why, in my opinion, QE is going to prove to be a massive hyperinflationary disaster. There are some, of course, who think QE is deflationary, which seems crazy to me, and I'll try to give you my opinion why. You might not agree with me, those people who say it's deflationary. Yeah, they've been wrong because maybe they don't know the definition of inflation or deflation. Maybe they look at those in terms of CPI, but we know, of course, that inflation is the creation of currency and credit out of thin air, and deflation is the opposite. But I would venture to say that the massive amount of money printing, or QE, that we've seen from the central banks since the '08 crisis is unprecedented, and they can't stop doing it. I know they've done the QT for the last 2 years, and they tried doing QT back in 2015 to 2018. And they did a little bit, but they had to come back with even more QE. And I think it's going to be the same thing coming up very soon. We even saw that Jay Powell announced a week or two ago at the FOMC that they're going to slow down QT, or quantitative tightening, which is the opposite of QE, by about 420 billion a year. I think it's just a matter of time when they'll have to basically type more trillions into their balance sheet, because that's all they do. They just create these billions, hundreds of billions, and trillions out of thin air. They don't go out and mine for gold and say, oh, we've got some gold here, and we're going to issue some currency backed by this gold. No, they just issue the currency out of thin air. And that's why Jim Sinclair used to say, the late Jim Sinclair, that the Federal Reserve was God. I don't think he meant it, but he was just kind of joking, because they can create things out of thin air. So they're God. And there are many people who don't understand that. They say that central banks borrow money into existence. I wish I could just, create money out of thin air and start buying everything around like the Fed does. But I'm going to focus today on the UK, because there are some stories out there about Gordon Brown, who was the Chancellor of the Exchequer under Tony Blair. He became Prime Minister, of course, later on for a year or two. I don't remember exactly. And he sold 395 tons of Britain's gold reserves back in the early part of this century. I think around 2000 to 2002, he sold 395 tons. And of course, that's a mistake. His excuse was that he wanted to diversify reserves. He said that there's a new currency, the euro. He wanted to hold more euro reserves, which I think was rubbish. I think there's a lot more behind the gold sale of Gordon Brown that one can speculate about. I don't have proof. One of the speculations is that at the time, gold is really at multi-decade lows around 250, 276 area. But there was some kind of a spike in the gold market, some kind of short squeeze, and a lot of the bullion banks apparently were in trouble. So they needed some help. So actually, Gordon Brown pre-announced a sale in 1999, and the price went down quite sharply, and then eventually he had to follow through with the sales. But there's an article here from March 4th this year talking about why Britain's still paying the price for Gordon Brown's gold bullion blunder. And I would argue as well that he probably had pressure from the Americans. Americans were pressuring everyone to sell their gold, the Swiss and others, because they wanted to keep that strong dollar policy. They wanted to keep interest rates low. Historically, if you Google Gibson's paradox, when the gold price is low, it reflects, people see it as a sign of low inflation, and it helps keep bond yields down. And I think that was the other reason they sold the gold. So I've done the calculations myself. At the moment, the losses from that sale are around $26 billion, which is a lot, of course, but nothing quite, and I'm not trying to forgive Gordon Brown. Gordon Brown is a horrible chancellor. And why do I say that? Well, because he wanted to keep the general public, the taxpayer, under the thumb. And I say that because I remember very well that instead of cutting taxes and cutting the size of government, he did the opposite. He instituted these tax credits. And I always ask myself, why don't you just cut taxes and keep sending money to people? Well, because he wanted to keep control of people. And of course, his sale of gold, I would argue, also pleased the City of London, banks like Goldman Sachs and others, big investment banks. So it helped keep the gilt market under control. He had like a cozy relationship with the City of London. But eventually, of course, his policies came to haunt him with the collapse of the housing market, with the collapse of the banking system. And by that time, of course, he'd left number 11, and he left the mess to Alistair Darling, who was his chancellor. And this is where we come to QE, because there's a recent article here as well on 26th of April in the Telegraph. Taxpayers brace for a $100 billion money printing bill, as George Osborne says, it's not my responsibility. Well, so what happened in 08-09? Well, the whole system was imploding, and the Bank of England cut rates to almost zero under Mervyn King. And then Alistair Darling signed off $150 billion in QE that the Bank of England should do, and they did it. So how does QE work? Well, basically, I'm Mervyn King here in my office at the Bank of England, and I just type 150 billion, and I tell my dealers on the dealing desk to just go and buy gilts to keep the yields low and raise the prices. And then Alistair Darling, then they went for another 200, and so on and so on throughout the years, even under the Tories and Mark Carney as Bank of England governor. They did it after the referendum in 2016, another 200. And then came Andrew Bailey. He did another 400. And we ended up with 895 billion of basically this Bank of England money created from the keyboard. Can you imagine if you could go into, hack into your own bank account and add loads of zeros to it? and that would be okay, you know, how much damage you could do. So that's why we've seen, for example, our currency go down so much, not just versus the dollar. The dollar, you know, the pound was worth over $2 in 2007. It's now worth 125. A couple of years ago, it went down to 103. But more importantly, versus real money or gold, the pound is melting down massively. Government currency always goes to zero. So that's all you need to know, guys. And if you want to protect yourselves by exchanging these pieces of paper or digital entries for real money, make sure you check out my affiliates below in the description, Gold Investments and Miles Franklin. And what George Osborne did is that they agreed to open this facility called Asset Purchase Facility. It's actually a limited company. You can go into company's house and find it. So how it would work, and this company would do the, you know, legally do the QE. It's not the Bank of England doing it, which is really complicated. But the profits they would make from holding those bonds, and the profits are like the interest income that they get, would stay in this facility, asset purchase facility. But then in 2012, what's his name, Osborne, being greedy and wanting to spend more and make his finances look better, said to the Bank of England, you have to give us these profits to the Treasury. But then he also agreed that when there are losses, the taxpayers would cover it. So yes, they got like quite a bit back from the Bank of England or APF, the Treasury. But now with bond prices crashing and yields going up, the Bank of England is making huge losses. And we're having to cover this. And this 100 billion figure here, that's going to be net, you know, a net figure, including how much the Bank of England sent already to the taxpayer. And this is expected by 2032. And we're already seeing politicians, and this is from reading this article, that are calling, you know, for the Bank of England to stop, you know, selling the bonds because, you know, why not hold it until maturity when they're worth, you know, par? Well, if they stop selling, it means that, you know, the tightening stops. So the politicians are trying to tell the Bank of England how to conduct monetary policy. So, yeah, that's why everything has become so much more expensive. Can you imagine if you could just create, let's say, 10 million pounds and put it into your bank account and then go around town buying loads of stuff? The shops would be cleaned up by just you, and they'd have to get more supply, or they might raise the price to stop you from buying everything. I mean, that's what QE is, guys, and that's why we're going to see hyperinflation, I think. And there are many symptoms out there, and I highly recommend you read Fiat Money Inflation in France, how it came, what it brought, and how it ended, by Andrew Dixon White. And this is during revolutionary France. And the French did the same thing in the 1790s that we did here in the UK just after the financial crisis of 2008. They started issuing unbacked, well, actually the French paper, the assignats, were backed by church land, but ours was even worse. It was backed by nothing. And that's what QE is. And the problem in France was that they couldn't stop. The economy would get a boost after, you know, each issue of currency. But then it would just, you know, the effect would come down. and then you had to do even more. It's almost like a drug addict. A drug addict always has to keep increasing the amount. And I'm afraid to say that it's going to be the same thing for the UK, the US, for Europe, Japan. We can see that it's a basket case and their currency is quickly collapsing. And our currency is quickly collapsing. I remember when the price of gold, when I started following gold, was just over 200 pounds an ounce. And yesterday it closed at 1,884. So that's not going to improve. That's not going to get better for our currency. It is going to continue to buy less and less real money. And it's because of this. And QE is not finished. Yes, this is just a pause. And we heard yesterday that the economy is growing better than expected. It's out of recession. But I think it's rubbish because the growth is not even at 1% per annum. It's like 0.6. We're running a budget deficit of almost 5%. We ran a budget deficit during COVID of 15, and it's been around 5 since then. So all this GDP growth it's not organic, and it's not from the private economy. It's from the government. So I wish I could have better news. So what's the other alternative to hyperinflation? Well, it's for governments to butt out of the economy, cut spending, cut taxes, cut the size of government. It's for the Bank of England not to listen to government and to really lower the amount of loans in the system. And you can do that by regulating the banks or keep raising rates as well. That's going to make it even more inflationary though. So it's a big mess. So yeah, you pull the plug on the economy, you collapse all the prices, you collapse the money supply, and then you start again. But of course, they're not going to do that. They're going to keep inflating. And at one point, and I think we're getting close to it, the general public will realize that there's no end to this inflationary policy, and they'll quickly lose confidence in the currency, and that will be reflected in a massive spike in gold and silver and commodities. And I think the food price rises that we're seeing already is a symptom of that. During this period in France, it was the food prices that first affected things, and they try to, the governments, as they always do, stupidly, they try to put price controls through the law of maximum in France. And I just saw that in Germany, politicians are talking about putting price controls on doner kebabs. Yes. So at least Olaf Scholz said that it wouldn't work because it would go against the free market. But other parties have said, oh, we need to put price controls. That doesn't work. But the other thing it tells you is that, yeah, the currency is going down the drain. And it's interesting, though, that Germans have experienced 2 hyperinflations in the last 101 years, 1923 and after World War II. And just saw a tweet the other day about Germany, and it's by Peter Spinner of GoldSeek and SilverSeek, and he said, Germans hoard tons of gold. 5.9% of the world's gold is German property. Frankfurt-based Reiser Bank estimates 9,034 tons of gold are privately held, 750 billion euros equivalent. So there you go. I'm sure a lot of Germans heard stories from their parents, grandparents, or even great-grandparents of how, you know, government currency always goes to zero. So with that, I'm going to wish you all a very good weekend. Take care. Bye.